Here we are, the release day for Anno 117. Pax Romana has finally arrived. Now it's been released for everyone to go and experience, so it's time for me to post this release review based on my time with the game and my opinion on the gameplay experience thus far. This video is out a bit later than I wanted to, but as you can hear, I'm not feeling really particularly well, or I'm not in a optima forma, as the Romans would say. So you'll have to excuse my voice. Thanks to Ubisoft, who provided me with a key earlier this week, I've been able to spend a few evenings with the game, with the latest installment in the Anno franchise. About 12 hours or so far, and I've been able to see enough of the game on top of what we were able to see in the demo a few months back to say that this is a very, very solid city builder game. In fact, I'd say it's more of an empire building game, because once you get past the initial stages of expanding your first island, your first town, the focus shifts to more organizing and managing your supply chain across multiple islands and even multiple maps. Now, before we dive in, my voice is already cracking up here, but before we dive in, I want to make clear that despite me getting a key for review, my thoughts and opinions, which I share with you in this video, are my own. Of course, they need to be, otherwise there will be no value in it for you watching, for the developer, or even the publisher. We all love games, and getting reasonable critique and feedback is just part of the process. That's to say, I'll call it out like I see it, of course, based on my personal opinion of this game and gaming in general. Just sharing this for full transparency, so you know what you're getting from me. Also, before you leave the video, when you get something out of it, then be sure to like the video, which helps me out a great deal in return. So thank you for that. But let's get to the reason why you're watching this video. What are you getting from Anno 117? I'm ever so slightly assuming that you are somewhat familiar with the Anno formula, but just in case you are not, your goal is to turn a small, singular trading outpost into a large network of islands, managing the local and global economies and tying it all together into a large and hopefully functional empire. You can expand peacefully, you can try to conquer other islands and players, but the core really revolves around unlocking higher population tiers that require certain goods and services, and each one becoming more and more complex as you progress, which presents certain challenges for you, the player, to overcome. Production chains, especially from population tiers 3 and up, can be quite extensive, but the game does a good job of presenting you with enough information in a clear way to figure out the best setup. Of course, some people will try to be as efficient as possible, trying to make the process as efficient as possible, where others might focus more on aesthetics to just build a good-looking city, and the game doesn't punish you for trying to be anything but the most perfect builder of production chains. So when you're the type of gamer that really likes to get into factorial levels of efficiency, you get something out of it. But when you just like to create the most gorgeous looking city with statues, plazas, and decorations, then you can also have a very good time with this game as well. I can see this in a lot of the gameplay features and how the game plays, and that's flexibility. In most city builder games, players usually progress in a very linear way. For example, you have to construct building A to unlock building B, and without buildings A and B, you cannot get to building C. How this works in Anno titles traditionally is that your citizens need to be provided with certain goods like cheese or togas to allow them to be upgraded to the next citizen tier. These would be very strict requirements. It was an all or nothing kind of deal, because without either cheese or togas, for example, you wouldn't be able to progress. So you would become stuck on having to arrange those specific production chains. Now the trouble was, if you didn't have all required fertilities, then you'd have to look for and colonize and first build an entire town on another island, which would cost you at least 1 hour worth of your time. In this game, the developers have given players much more flexibility by presenting you with more goods to produce than what is actually needed for any citizen tier to progress. Meaning, if you can't easily provide in one product, then you might be able to just go for the other one, and by doing so, You get the sense that you're doing what you, the player, want to do in that moment, instead of having this task or chore forced upon you that you know is going to cost you a lot of time to get set up. And for me personally, that's really worth something because I have a full time job, a family, wife, two young kids with busy schedules. So when I do get some time to myself to relax, play a game, I don't like having to spend 70% of my time doing some sort of mandatory chore. So this makes Anno 117 a far more easygoing game where part of the fun comes from planning on what to build next. In my mind, there's always this kind of discussion going on like, do I expand my workforce by building more houses? Do I start working on a new production chain to fulfill a certain need? And you can really tell that the developers have got this entire formula really locked in. Aside from the need system, we have the discovery tree, which acts as your research system. We have the 8 attributes, so income, population, knowledge, belief, fire safety, happiness, prestige, and health, that determine how your city is affected by whatever buildings you've constructed and where you've placed them. Then we have the new building buff system, where buildings give out bonuses to other buildings surrounding them, in turn having an effect on your attributes. Now, a great design detail here is that these buffs are tied to the buildings in a logical and narrative sense. The market, for example, generates more income as a place of commerce, and happy hour at the tavern makes for very content citizens. The impressive part for me here is how seamlessly all these systems are connected to one another and work as one cohesive part. Games can often offer lots of systems but then fall flat in terms of gameplay experience when those systems can't seem to really connect properly, or players get the idea that you have all these separate activities but nothing that really ties them together. Now here in Anno, that seems to all work like a breeze, and having reached tier 3 so far for me, with multiple islands in both Latium and Albion, I have yet to see any major cracks in the entire setup. Because not once during my sessions did I feel like I couldn't properly focus on playing the game because I was getting distracted by unclear mechanics or systems. It all comes together very organically, and how you can just start from scratch, build up your first production chains, housing, and start fulfilling needs. It all feels very intuitive. The game guides you forward in a sense without explicitly telling you how you should go about it or what your next step should be. It's just letting you do you. Now, back when the demo went live, people were disappointed by the 1 hour time cap it had, meaning it was hard to get both a grasp of the early, or maybe the transition from early to mid game, part of the game, from which point most of these kind of city builder games tend to really get on their way. But it was just as hard for players that simply like to take their time in building up their town and lean more towards enjoying the art and level design, or in less clinical terms, the atmosphere of the game. And that's another big plus. The atmosphere here is great. Depending on your system's hardware and what settings you can run the game at, the level of detail will vary, but by all accounts, this game looks very pretty, and the amount of detail that has gone into each building model is crazy. The fact that you can zoom all the way in and see people going about their lives, swimming in pools, drinking wine and ale at the tavern, they've done this for every single structure. And it makes your city really come alive if you zoom in or if you're zoomed all the way out. There's always something going on, and it's really cool to look at, especially combined with the day and night cycle. And as soon as you start expanding beyond your first island, this is when you'll encounter the other players, and once you get trade routes between your islands set up, then you'll notice the entire game world really comes alive as well, with trade ships going back and forth, ports being visited by traders, and patrols of warships guarding your islands against pirates. I mean, when you're new to Anno, the trade route system, as well as your inventory management system on your islands, they're both intuitive enough. These haven't changed much over the last couple of Anno titles, but small tweaks have certainly been made to make it as easy as can be to get started without the need for elaborate tutorials. There's a basic min-max system in warehouses that lets you determine how much stock you want to keep and sell to other players to earn you some extra income, and setting up trade routes to your own island is just done in a couple of seconds. At one point, you're able to expand to the other province. Of course, depending on where you started, it's going to be either Latium or Albion, But this really opens up the game even more, presenting you with a different culture to build a city with. And at some point, I found myself realizing that, because you're switching up, going from one province to the other, and then you get drawn into building a town there, and you're trying to fulfill certain needs or produce certain goods so you can take that back to your other province. And this way, you're just gradually growing a list of things you can do to keep you occupied. And it's really keeping me going within the game. So I think that's a really good point. One system, however, I don't feel is very convincing at this point in time is the modular ship system. So you have two categories of ships. You have your trade vessels and you have your military vessels with 3 tiers of hull sizes per category. Now you can configure every ship template by adding extra oars for speed or an archery tower for extra attack power, each upgrade being offset by inducing extra maintenance and upgrade costs. So it works really well. Don't get me wrong, the system itself works with the same clean, intuitive UI that you see with the other systems, but I don't feel it really adds something noteworthy or impactful to ships per se. For example, in a battle between two similar ships, it feels like a game of rock, paper, scissors, where the one that fires first or has an extra archery tower on it gets the drop on the other ship. So you are tempted to, by default, install those modules, otherwise you'll likely lose your ship. Now, only having two flavors, adding either speed or attack power, this doesn't make the feature really stand out in a meaningful way. Now, truth be told, I have only built a couple of ships and I have only been in small engagements where these changes might be small in comparison. So maybe when I start to see some larger naval battles with at least a dozen ships on each side, but that's something I'll test for a full review in a couple of weeks. Another point that deserves some attention here is the difference between the demo and the full build in terms of polish and balancing. During the demo, there were people on the internet who were less than impressed by the UI, calling it bland, uninspiring, or even boring. Now, at that time, I didn't think this was a problem. After all, it is a demo, and the most important part for the developers at that point is to get our feedback on the gameplay, the systems, and to see if players don't encounter any major problems. Now, the shapes and sizes of certain UI elements is then of a lesser concern. However, that's not to say feedback on the topic is ignored, but most likely they are already working behind the scenes on polishing the UI up for release. It's just that they chose an earlier version of the UI for the demo build. But now looking at the full release, you can tell they've added these small orange golden looking veins, for example, to anything that has a blue background to give it that marble effect. And if you really look around and try and make some sort of a comparison, if you have played the demo, you can tell there's been a lot of smaller tweaks and additions to what we've seen before. I'm not going to do a side-by-side comparison of the UI, but it's clear that a lot of these small changes have been made, and not just for the UI, but for balancing as well. Wheat, for example, no longer require, I can hardly pronounce it with my voice, wheat, the stuff that you make bread from, no longer requires an island fertility to be present, making it easier to increase your population. My guess here is that this has been done to make it easier for players to have enough workforce to expand without having to build more housing, which can, because one of the attributes that gets increased when you provide your people with bread is that you get extra population per housing already built. And if you would have to resort to just building more houses, that can present you with other scaling issues. Plus, this also increases your income in a more controlled manner, making it a bit easier for players to stay away from negative income early on. Now, at this point, what you're getting is a really, really solid city builder experience that is an evolution of the tried and true Anno formula. I found very little points of critique, although I have to get deeper into land combat, the multiplayer modes. Somebody asked me about it in a comment on my previous videos, or one of my previous videos. The tier 4 population I still have to get a really good look at. And late game city building, so when your city starts to really expand and starts to grow beyond its own sort of borders, that's something I have to review on a much deeper level. But seeing how the game plays until now, it's highly unlikely that if you like what you see now, that those features will be able to spoil the entire experience for you, once you get to late game. Now, I can nitpick about certain build menus not being hidden as soon as I left click anywhere on the screen, or that in certain instances when I'm building farmlands that the toggle between horizontal and diagonal construction doesn't seem to trigger at times. But I think these cases are sparse, and far from game breaking, obviously. So if you're thinking about buying the game because you like city builders in general, I think Anno 117 will give you excellent value for $60 for the base game. Now I've been playing for about 12 hours so far, and I very much enjoy myself. I'm sort of in mid game. Honestly, I'm having a lot of fun. For Anno fans, Anno 117 is either a solid step up from Anno 1800 or simply a nice, refreshing take due to the theme, because I know some of you will be going back to Anno 1800, having put hundreds or maybe even thousands of hours into it. Obviously, you won't just cold turkey replace 1800 with 117 just like that. But it's nice to know both titles can be appreciated for their own characters, for their own flair and style. Now, there's a lot about this game to appreciate in terms of aesthetics, and if you like to take your time to slowly build out your city, being less pragmatic about it and more into making it look good, then the game has more than plenty to offer. With an entire menu dedicated to beautification and the diagonal construction feature helping you out to create more organic looking layouts. Now, as you can tell, my voice is really getting worse because I've just been talking nonstop to record this, and I have a party to attend to this afternoon. St. Nicholas is arriving in the Netherlands today, so before I won't be able to speak altogether for the rest of the day, even though my wife would relish the thought, but let's not keep that between us. I'm going to leave this release review here, and I hope you have a better idea now of what Anno 117 has to offer at release. But before you leave, like and subscribe, and I will be grateful for you for doing so and helping me out to grow the channel. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you guys next time, and have a great day. Bye, guys.